Today on Arid we are talking all things Echeveria. I'm talking, of course, about those wonderful succulent rosettes, which through incredible breeding efforts, there are all sorts of amazing shapes, colours and sizes. And from my own experience, they're more difficult than they might otherwise seem. I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey, my first little steps into the world of Echeverias, where I've had a few successes, like with this guy, and a few, let's call them catastrophic moments as well. So this is all about my journey as I try to learn about a whole new group of plants, what they like, what they don't like, and especially how not to kill them. Let's see how we go, eh? Now, before we get into the meat of the episode, I want to introduce you to the star of today's episode. This little double-headed beauty is called Echeveria Etna, and you can just see those delicate pastel colours that typify what I suppose makes Echeverias so appealing to so many. Now, this one in particular is quite an interesting form because if you look at the leaves, they're covered in what are called caruncles, and they're essentially these kind of interesting warty growths. Now, if you've spent more than a minute watching my channel, you'll know that I'm a big proponent of the weird and the strange, and those bumpy, warty, textured leaves, they really speak to me. I think they're fantastic. They not only give this a strange texture, but in my eyes, they enhance the beauty of the plant. And I've had a lot of success with this particular plant. But as I've dipped my toes into the worlds of Echeveria, it hasn't always necessarily been smooth sailing, as you're going to find out. So let's start with a bit of backstory. It all began probably mid last year when someone, I'm not exactly sure who, left a comment asking for me to focus on, let's call them more normal succulents, because as you can see behind me, there's a lot of really weird, grotesque and spiny stuff, and not a whole lot of a focus on things that are more beautiful, more aesthetic, more lovely, more charming. I thought, you know what, I can do that. I can challenge myself, I can step outside my comfort zone. So the first thing I did, I went out and I bought myself a pachyphytum. Not an Echeveria, but very, very closely related. They're both members of the Crassulaceae family. And at first I found this plant quite challenging. This is called a pachyphytum baby fingers. It's a cultivar, and as soon as I planted it up, it started dropping its leaves, and I thought, okay, I've been bested here. These things are too hard for me. This is not going to work out. But after it had a bit of a transition period in my greenhouse, it settled down, and now the thing is really, really thriving. It's got heaps of new growth on it and seemingly loving life. And I've gone out and I've bought some more pachyphytums and thought, yeah, all good. It is time now to move my focus over to the world of Echeverias. And that's precisely what I did. I went out and I bought two of them. I could never quite bring myself to drop myself into the beautiful end of the spectrum. So I ordered two Echeverias. One of them is called Echeveria Black Mediba, a cultivar that has these thick, almost wrinkled leaves. And if they get enough light, those leaves are a nice sort of chocolate verging on black colour. And the other one I got was an Echeveria Romeo Blood Spots. Now, Echeveria Romeo in itself is a cultivar defined by very, very bright red leaves. But blood spots, those bright red bits, were kind of more like splattered on the leaves. And I thought, you know what? That sits happily in a space between beautiful and grotesque. Those are the two plants for me. So I got them, came here, and a little bit like the pachyphytum, at first they were a bit touch and go, but then they seemed to settle in, they sent out a lot of roots, and they were happy. They were beautifully, wonderfully happy. Now, whenever I get myself a new plant, one of the first things that I think is just super important is to research, what does it need? And there are two repeated factors when it comes to Echeveria care. The first of those, of course, is about watering. They don't want to be overwatered, lest they rot. And that's the same for many and probably most of our succulents. I'm quite familiar with that. Now, the other thing was, if you want to get the best colours out of them, they need to be exposed to really, really strong sunlight. And the good news is that's something that I've got in abundance here. Sydney in summer, it's all sun, especially in this backyard. And so I thought to myself, you know what? I reckon this isn't going to pose too much of a challenge. In fact, so comfortable was I that I thought, it's time to start expanding the Echeveria collection, and that's where Echeveria Etna came in. I saw this wonderful double header, the Cactus and Succulent Society show, for 30 bucks, and I thought, you know what? Those little bumpy, warty leaves, perfect. A perfect addition. And then it came. And so began what I thought was the beginning of a wonderful, wonderful relationship between me and Echeverias. Now, I had them all out exposed to full blasting sunlight. I thought, you know what, in habitat, these guys, they're probably getting heaps of sun. And the Black Madiba and the Romeo blood spots, they didn't seem fazed by that at all. But then on one particularly scorching summer's day, Etna here, I could see the leaves weren't quite the colour that I imagined. I thought they were getting a bit scorched. They were turning almost an orange colour. I thought, no, you know what? I cannot afford to risk this. These plants, they need to be rescued from the brutality of Sydney's summer sun. And so I brought them all in here. Now, my greenhouse here is still, I would say, very, very sunny. But it's got a 30% shade cloth over the top just to take the edge off the worst of the sun that we get here. And I thought, you know what, that's going to be ideal. That's bright enough and that's fantastic. And Etna loved it. She's been in there ever since. And the colours perhaps could be a little bit more on the pink side, but by and large, I think she looks fantastic. Those beautiful, delicate pastels are just a wonder to look at. And, you know, really living up to what I would hope for from Echeveria plants. But what I found was Black Madiba and Romeo blood spots, they sort of started to, I don't know, revert a little bit. They started losing the intensity of the colour that I'd achieved out here in the blistering sun. Black Madiba was turning a bit more like green Madiba. Romeo blood spots was more like Romeo anemic. And so, you know, I thought to myself, I cannot do it. I cannot leave them in here and not have these things looking as beautifully charming and colourful as they were destined to be. And I thought, you know what? To hell with it. If we get scorching 40°C days, they're succulents. They can put up with that. And so I brought them back out and put them into the full blasting sun. And it wasn't a mistake. Here's the thing. When those brutal days of summer came by, nothing happened. In fact, it actually took longer for them to start regaining their colour than I'd ever actually imagined. But they did get there. Now, I'd love it if you hit like and subscribe on today's video, because all of it helps this channel to grow. And if you're really, really invested into Aridzine, check out the link on the screen. There are some really cool merch options and a Patreon with a thriving little community of cactus obsessed, all chatting away, sharing pictures of their plants and having a fantastic time. And twice a year, physical zines get sent all over the world. It's a whole lot of fun. Check out the link on the screen. Let's get back to the Echeverias. So let's just take a moment to reflect on the science behind where that colour comes from, because the colour in Echeverias is a very direct response to its environment. It's caused by a chemical compound called anthocyanin, which is essentially almost like a chemical sunscreen for these plants. It's triggered by intense light, UV light. It can be triggered by cold and drought. And all of these factors essentially bring out this anthocyanin sunscreen to protect the photosynthetic cells in the plant. Basically, they don't want to be all activated if they're just getting absolutely brutal sunlight, or if the plant itself is in dormancy. So that's why cold will also activate them. You give it those environmental stress factors, basically stress your plant to absolute buggery, and that's how you get the best colours out of them. And so it shouldn't have been a surprise that by exposing it to super intense heat and sunny days was what brought out the sun. Whereas the nice cushy existence here in the greenhouse made them revert to a less colourful form. That's just how they react to the world to enable them to survive. It's a fascinating evolutionary adaptation. But here's the problem. Exposing them to the sun in my context means exposing them to all the weather. And when you get a bit of rain, or should I say a whole lot of rain, suddenly that whole notion that they don't want too much water is stress tested. Let's see what happened when that occurred. It was after a particularly intense, dry, hot, sunny spell that Sydney's weather broke. And we had 2 days of relentless downpour. Just an endless sheet of water seemingly pouring from the heavens. And as you can imagine, a lot of succulents don't really want that sort of depth of water. Now, they sat there, they took it, I didn't move them. I thought, let's just see how they go. I reckon they'll be okay. And then it was about a week later, I walked over, I looked at them, I thought, you're not looking quite right, are you, mate? And with the gentlest touch, Black Madiba, the leaves all just started falling off. They had black streaks through them, what I can only assume was some sort of fungal infection. A couple of days later, Romeo blood spots, same story, except the leaves weren't quite so loose. They're still kind of sitting there, black streaks. Because as you can imagine, black streaks through beautiful colour, that's not beautiful, and it's not the sort of grotesque that I particularly want to cultivate. I want to cultivate happy and healthy plants. I want to have a thriving collection of things that are all really well suited to my context, that don't need to be moved around constantly. And so suddenly I'm thinking to myself, I'm not quite sure if those 2 cultivars of Echeveria are quite right for me. But there was a problem, because I just doubled down on the whole Echeveria obsession. That's right, I reckon it was about 2 days before all the leaves started falling off that I was so confident with my skill with Echeverias that I saw this guy at a nursery. Now, it had been very, very well pampered, and it didn't have a cultivar name attached, so I don't really know what it is. But I saw it, and I saw it had these fantastic caruncles on the leaves, wonderful warts that speak directly to my love of the mutant and the monstrose. And I thought, you know what? It's time to expand the Echeveria collection. So I brought it home, and then sure enough, my other ones started showing signs of ill health. And so now I'm left in a really weird position, because I've just adopted more, and I've also lost all confidence in my ability to grow these things. But of course, experimentation is always the joy of introducing new plants to your collection. I know for certain that a lot of my knowledge about cacti and succulents has come through stress testing them and ultimately killing them, seeing what limits they can push. So this guy, he may not have entered into the collection of someone who genuinely knows what they're doing yet, but I've learned a few things from Black Madiba and Romeo blood spots, as well as Etna, that I reckon are going to help this guy on his journey into being a fantastic specimen. But what I want to do today, now that I've told you the backstory, I'm going to go and get Black Madiba, I'm going to go and get Romeo blood spots, and we're going to head chop them. We're going to take the tops off them and see, has the fungal infection spread from the leaves into the stem? Is the stem okay? Because one thing I do know about Echeverias is that they propagate so wonderfully and so easily, you just have to more or less chop a bit off and you get a new plant. So today we're doing a bit of a dissection. It may be for propagation purposes, it might be an autopsy. We'll find out soon enough. And I'm going to leave you on a positive note anyway. It isn't all death and disaster. My Echeveria journey isn't quite over just yet. So I suppose now is as good a time as any to introduce you to the sad victims of this terrible tale. This is Black Madiba, or at least what's left of Black Madiba anyway. And this is Romeo Blood Spots. Both of them very sad, pale imitations of their original selves. And you can just see the state of that fungal infection all through the leaves. Pretty grim viewing, right? It'll be particularly interesting when we take the knife to them and see what's going on. All right, here we go. It's time to start hacking these things to pieces, and we'll see the state of the interior of them, shall we? Let's start with Black Madiba. We are looking for any signs of fungal infection inside the stem. And look at that. You can see straight up the middle of the plant, rot. This guy's a goner. There's no coming back from that, I don't think. Maybe if I keep hacking it to pieces, there'll be some sign of life. But Black Madiba is not looking like a happy ending at this point. All right, let's check out Romeo Blood Spots. Turn you around and see what's going on in here. Now, I don't even really see much evidence of a stem there. Let's just find out what's going on. Okay. Now that doesn't look too bad. I'm going to clear away some of these. I mean, the leaves you can see are just littered with infection, so I reckon there's not much hope for this guy either. But you know what? I don't want this to be a tragedy. I don't want to leave my Echeveria story on a sad note, because there is some good news. Way back at the start of the process, I took some leaf propagations. I thought, you know what? If I'm going to grow Echeveria, I should try my hand at propagating them early. So I plucked off some leaves, lay them down on the soil as all the good online tutorials suggest, and now I've got a whole bunch of little tiny babies ready to carry the lineage forward. So the story of those two very sad plants does not end here today. Besides, I've still got a fantastic and very weird looking Etna and this strange bumpy warty looking thing in the collection anyway. So I'll tell you what, I'm probably not about to expand my Echeveria collection too much anytime soon, and I certainly won't be making a video tutorial on how best to care for these plants, at least until I've got my head around it myself. But I've had a really enjoyable little dabble in the beautiful and surprising world of Echeverias. It's had its ups, it's had its downs, but I've done a lot of fun learning along the way. And I hope you've learned a little bit about those fantastic plants as well today, because that's all I've got for you. I'm Michael, this is Arid Zine. I'll catch you next Monday.